I never thought I'd see fear in my grandson's eyes when he looked at me. He was only 7, standing there in the dim light of my basement stairs, trembling like he'd seen something monstrous. But what he saw down there wasn't evil. It was truth. My truth. The kind his father, my son, spent years trying to bury. I never wanted it to happen this way. I never wanted him to find out like that. But sometimes, life doesn't wait for the right moment. It simply tears open the past and throws it in your face. Before we continue to the story, please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. It all began that morning when my son, David, called. His voice carried that usual tone of forced politeness he used whenever he needed something. "Dad," he said, "we're coming over. The kids miss you." I could hear the hesitation between his words, the kind that comes when affection and obligation get tangled. It had been months since I'd last seen them, and I wasn't sure if this sudden visit was out of guilt or necessity. I cleaned the house anyway. I even set out my late wife's favorite cookies, the kind she used to bake for the kids when they were little. When they arrived, my grandson Tommy ran straight into my arms. His small hands clutched my shirt as if holding onto a memory that might fade if he let go. "Grandpa, you smell like cinnamon," he said, giggling. My heart softened. He was the only one who still looked at me without judgment. Behind him, David and his wife stepped in, both carrying that air of superiority they'd perfected since their lives turned comfortable. David glanced around my house with faint disapproval. "You should sell this place, Dad," he muttered. "Move into something smaller. It's too much for you." I ignored him. He didn't understand that this house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was where I'd built my life, where I'd raised him, where I'd loved and lost everything that mattered. Lunch was pleasant enough. My daughter-in-law scrolled through her phone more than she spoke. David asked the usual empty questions. I answered them with the patience of an old man who'd learned that silence often says more than words. Everything was fine, until Tommy asked, "Grandpa, can I see the basement?" The table went quiet. I froze. The basement, the one place in this house where time still stood still. My wife's sewing table, my old workbench, and a locked chest sitting against the far wall, all untouched since the night everything fell apart. "There's nothing much down there, son," I said softly. But curiosity burns differently in children. His eyes gleamed with that stubborn innocence that reminded me of myself. Before I could protest again, David laughed and said, "Oh, let him look, Dad. It's just a basement, not a vault." His words carried mockery, but beneath them was a warning I couldn't ignore. He knew what was down there. He always knew. And maybe, deep down, he wanted the boy to see, to ruin the last good thing I had left. Tommy's footsteps echoed as he descended. I followed him halfway down, the old stairs creaking under my weight. Dust floated in the air like ghosts remembering their shapes. He stopped when he reached the bottom, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Then his little voice broke the silence. "Grandpa, why is there a blanket on the floor?" My throat tightened. The blanket, the one my wife used on her last night alive, the one stained with the secrets David wanted buried forever. He shouldn't have seen that. None of them should have. I stepped closer, my voice trembling. "That belonged to your grandma," I said. "She was sick back then. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away." But before I could say more, David appeared behind me, his tone sharp and accusing. "You should have cleaned this place years ago," he snapped. "You live surrounded by the past." His wife gasped quietly when her flashlight caught the outline of an old framed photo on the wall, one of me, David, and my wife smiling at a family picnic. The photo was cracked down the middle, the glass splintered right across my wife's face. Tommy reached out to touch the frame, and in that moment David shouted, "Don't touch that!" His voice was louder than it needed to be, almost panicked. Tommy flinched, stepping back into my arms. That's when David's anger turned toward me. "This is exactly why I didn't want to come here," he said through clenched teeth. "You can't let go of her, can you? Even after what you did." His words hit harder than any slap could. My grandson looked up, confused. "What did Grandpa do, Daddy?" David's silence afterward was deafening. He wouldn't answer, but his eyes said enough. There it was again, That look of accusation I'd lived with for 26 years. I took a deep breath, fighting back the ache in my chest. "You don't understand what happened that night," I said quietly. "You never did." David turned away. "We're leaving," he muttered. His wife nodded, already heading for the stairs. But Tommy hesitated. His small hand still clutched mine. "Grandpa, are you okay?" he whispered. I knelt beside him, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Yes, my boy," I said. "Go on. I'll be all right." When the door closed behind them, the silence returned, thick, heavy, and familiar. I stood there for a long while, staring at that old blanket, at the photograph, at the ghosts that refused to leave this place. My wife's voice echoed faintly in my mind, her last words before she fell silent forever. "Promise me you'll protect him." I had kept that promise all these years, even when it cost me everything. But as the night fell and the wind whispered through the cracks of my house, I realized something had changed. Tommy had seen too much. David's fear wasn't about the past. It was about the truth finally reaching his son. And that truth was closer than he ever imagined. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the house felt louder than usual, every shadow longer, like the past itself was crawling out of the corners. I sat by the window, watching the empty road where David's car had vanished hours earlier. My heart felt heavy, not because they left, but because of the way Tommy looked at me before he did. That mixture of innocence and fear was something I couldn't forget. I had seen that same look once before, on David's face, the night his mother died. Before we continue to the story, please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. The clock struck midnight. I poured myself a glass of water, hands trembling just slightly, and stared at the basement door from across the room. It had always been closed, always locked, like a secret too dangerous to speak of. But that night, the lock was gone. I froze. The door stood slightly ajar, a thin sliver of darkness spilling into the hallway. I hadn't left it that way. My stomach twisted. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and descended the stairs. The air down there was colder than usual, thick with dampness and memory. My light fell on the old chest, the one I hadn't opened in decades. The lock on it was broken too. Inside were pieces of my life that I thought I'd hidden forever. Old letters, newspaper clippings, a photo of my wife lying on the floor the night I found her, and tucked in one corner, the police report. I hadn't touched it since the investigation closed. Cause of death, accidental fall. But David never believed that. He was 16 then, angry, lost, convinced I had pushed her. The argument that night had been bad. She discovered the affair I never meant to happen, and she wanted to leave. I begged her to stay. She turned away, and then she fell. For years, I let him hate me. I thought it was the punishment I deserved. But what I discovered later, when it was far too late, was that he had twisted that hatred into something else entirely. A story he fed to his wife, to his son, to anyone who would listen. A story where I was the villain and he was the victim. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was short, written in David's tight, angry handwriting. "Stay away from my family." My hand shook as I read it. He didn't understand that everything I did for him. Even the lie I buried that night. Especially that. I tried to go about my day as if nothing had changed. I worked in the garden, fed the birds, fixed the gate. But every so often, I caught myself glancing at the road, half expecting to see Tommy running back. He didn't. Days passed. Then a week. Then two. The silence of the house grew heavier. I thought that was the end of it, until I heard a knock on the door one rainy afternoon. When I opened it, I froze. It was Tommy, soaked from head to toe, clutching a backpack and a small stuffed toy. "Daddy's gone," he whispered. My heart nearly stopped. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, kneeling down. He sniffled, tears streaming down his cheeks. They were fighting again. "He left last night. Mommy said he's not coming back." I brought him inside, wrapped him in a blanket, made him cocoa. As he sat there by the fire, his small voice trembling, he said, "Grandpa, Daddy said you're dangerous. But you don't look dangerous." I felt something inside me break. I wanted to tell him everything, to explain the truth. But he was just a child, So I said softly, "Sometimes grown-ups say things when they're hurt. It doesn't mean they're true." He nodded, but his eyes carried questions I couldn't answer. That evening, I tucked him into bed in the guest room, the same room David slept in when he was little. As I watched him drift off, I couldn't help but notice how much he resembled his father, the same stubborn chin, the same restless spirit. I sighed. History has a cruel way of repeating itself. Around midnight, I heard something outside. A car. Headlights flashed through the window. I went to the door and found David standing there, drenched, his face pale with fury. "Where is he?" he demanded. His voice cracked under the weight of rage. "He's sleeping," I said quietly. "You shouldn't have come." He pushed past me, storming inside. "You think you can steal my son now?" he shouted. "First my mother, now him?" His words sliced through the air like blades. I followed him down the hallway, my voice low but steady. "You left him, David. He came here." He turned on me, eyes burning. "You don't get to act noble. You ruined everything. You always have." His fists clenched, trembling. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. But instead, he stormed toward the basement door. "You want to talk about ruining things?" I said quietly. "Then tell me, David, what really happened that night after she fell?" He froze. The air between us turned still. His face changed, not anger this time, but fear. Real sharp fear. "You don't know when to stop," he muttered. "You think I didn't see you that night, but I did. You were standing over her." I stepped closer. "And you were standing behind her, weren't you?" He went pale. I saw the truth flash in his eyes, quick and guilty, before he turned away. That was the moment I knew I was right. He wasn't the innocent boy I once thought he was. He was the reason she fell. He backed away slowly. "You're crazy," he whispered. "Stay away from us." Then he was gone. The door slammed, the car engine roared, and he disappeared into the storm. I stood there, my chest heavy, my hands shaking not from age, but from the realization that for 26 years I had carried his sin on my shoulders. I had let him live free while I wore the chains. And now, looking down that basement staircase, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let the story end with silence again. Not this time. The rain kept falling outside, drumming softly against the roof as I sat by the basement door until dawn. My grandson was still sleeping upstairs, dreaming in peace, unaware that the man who called himself his father had been lying his entire life. But soon, very soon, that truth would come out. And when it did, none of them would ever look at me the same way again. The next morning, the world looked washed clean, but my heart was anything but. I watched the mist drift across the fields from my porch, Tommy's laughter faintly echoing inside as he played with the old train, set I'd kept from David's childhood. His voice filled the silence that had haunted this house for years. For a few brief hours, it almost felt like I had my family back. But peace never lasts long when built on lies. I sat at the kitchen table, turning the police report over in my hands. 26 years of guilt, of silence, of being the villain in my own son's story. I had spent so long protecting him, trying to keep his secret buried. But now, seeing him twist my grandson against me, I knew that protecting him had only poisoned us all. The truth had to come out, even if it shattered what little remained of our family. Before we go deeper into this story, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the hidden faces behind ordinary lives. That afternoon, I drove into town. The road was slick from last night's storm, trees bending low with rainwater. I stopped at the old library, one of the few places left where people still believed in paper and ink. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, remembered me from years ago. She smiled kindly, not knowing that inside my coat pocket lay the file that would tear my family apart. I asked to use the copier. As the pages fed through, the rhythmic hum sounded almost like breathing, steady, inevitable. When the last page slid out, I placed the copies in an envelope and wrote a single name on it: Detective Harris, the same man who'd led the original investigation into my wife's death. He was retired now, living quietly on the other side of town. I still remembered his face the day he closed the case, his eyes uncertain but forced to follow the evidence, or lack of it. When I knocked on his door, he took a moment to recognize me. Arthur, he said slowly, it's been a long time. His hair had turned silver, his frame smaller, but his mind was as sharp as ever. I told him I needed him to look at something. We sat at his kitchen table, and I laid out the copies, the photos, the statements, the timelines. And then I showed him the one thing I hadn't shown anyone before. The letter. My wife's letter. I had found it wedged behind her dresser days after she died, half-crumpled and water-stained. She'd written it the night before the fall. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to David. I know what you did. She had written. If you ever try to hurt him again, I'll tell him the truth. Detective Harris read the letter twice, his eyes narrowing. You never turned this in, he asked. I shook my head. He was 16. I couldn't destroy his life. Harris sighed, rubbing his temples. Arthur, you should have told me. If this letter had surfaced, the case would have gone a very different way. I know, I said quietly, but maybe it's not too late to set it right. He agreed to reopen his notes privately, to see what could still be proven. I left his house with a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of silence lifting. But revenge, real revenge, is never clean. It demands more than confession. It demands truth, witnessed and undeniable. When I returned home, the house was quiet, too quiet. I called for Tommy, but there was no answer. My heart began to race. I checked the backyard, the porch, the shed, nothing. Then I saw the note on the counter. It was from David's wife, Clara. He came for him. I tried to stop it. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys and drove. The rain had started again, light but relentless, drumming against the windshield as I sped down the narrow country roads. My mind replayed every word, every accusation, every moment of hesitation I'd ever had. And then, in the distance, I saw it, David's car, parked outside the old sawmill at the edge of town, the same place where he used to hide when he was a teenager, angry and lost. I pulled up beside it, my headlights slicing through the fog. The door to the mill was open. Inside, the air smelled of oil and dust, and the sound of dripping water echoed off the walls. I found him near the center, standing over Tommy, who sat on the floor crying. Let him go, I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. David turned, his eyes wild. You couldn't leave it alone, could you? He spat. You had to dig it all up again. You left me no choice, I said quietly. You let her die. You let me take the blame. You let your son grow up believing I was a monster. His hand tightened on Tommy's shoulder. You don't know what it was like, he said, voice breaking. She was going to send me away. She said she'd tell everyone what I'd done. I just wanted her to stop screaming. The words echoed in the cavernous space, the final confession of a man who had been hiding from himself for decades. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From pity. Tommy looked between us, confusion and horror in his small eyes. Daddy, he whispered. David let out a broken laugh. You see, now you've ruined him too. I stepped forward. No, David, you ruined yourself, and it's time the world knew it. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed faintly in the darkness. What are you doing? He snapped. Recording, I said. For once in your life, you're going to tell the truth. He lunged at me, but years of guilt had slowed him more than age ever could. I stepped aside, and he stumbled, hitting the concrete hard. Tommy screamed. I reached down, helping the boy to his feet, and back toward the door. David lay there, staring up at the ceiling, breathing heavily. You think people will believe you? He said weakly. An old man's story? I looked down at him. It's not just my story anymore. Outside, the rain poured harder. I carried Tommy to the car, my heart pounding. Behind us, the sawmill loomed like a dying ghost. As we drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. For the first time in 26 years, I didn't see a monster looking back. I saw a man who had finally stopped running. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The world still thought I was guilty. The truth still needed to be told. And the perfect moment for that revenge was yet to come. By morning, the storm had passed, but my mind was still in it. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and guilt. Tommy was asleep in the guest room, his small hands clutching the toy plane I'd carved for him years ago. I stood by the window, watching the first pale light crawl over the fields, and realized something. Peace was not forgiveness. Peace was the pause before justice. I called Detective Harris again. He answered on the first ring, voice rough from age but sharp with purpose. "I saw your son last night," I said. He confessed. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Do you have it recorded?" I told him yes. His tone changed. "Arthur, that's enough to reopen everything. Bring it to me." Before we continue deeper into this story, please subscribe to our channel for more stories where truth finally finds its voice. I sat at the table, replaying David's voice on the phone screen. Every word was a blade, each confession slicing through the lies that had buried my wife's memory. It didn't bring comfort, only clarity. I copied the video to a flash drive and sealed it in an envelope marked for the truth. Then I made another copy. That one wasn't for the police. It was for the public. When Tommy woke, I told him we were going for a drive. He looked at me with those same blue eyes his father once had before they hardened. "Are we going to see Dad?" he asked softly. I hesitated. "Not today," I said. "Today, we're going to set things right." We stopped first at the flower shop. I bought a single white rose, the kind my wife loved. Then we drove to the cemetery. The sky was still gray, but sunlight broke through in thin rays like threads of forgiveness, trying to reach the ground. I knelt by her grave, brushing away the leaves. "It's over now," I whispered. "They'll know what really happened. You can rest." Tommy placed a rose on the headstone. "Grandma was nice, right?" he asked. I nodded. "She had a laugh that could fill this whole world," I said, "and a heart too big for the pain she carried." He smiled, not fully understanding but trying to. We drove on, to the town hall. The courthouse steps looked steeper than I remembered, the marble cracked with time. Inside, I handed the flash drive to Harris. "Whatever happens after this," I told him, "make sure my grandson knows the truth. Not the story his father built, but the truth." Harris nodded. His eyes were heavy with something like respect, maybe regret. It didn't take long. News travels fast when it smells like scandal. Within a week, the town that had once whispered about me as a murderer now whispered about my son. Reporters gathered outside his house, cameras flashing, voices shouting for a statement. David tried to deny it at first. Then the video leaked. His voice echoed across every local broadcast, every social feed. She was going to tell. I just wanted her to stop screaming. It was over. There was no escaping it now. But revenge isn't always a roar. Sometimes it's a quiet reckoning. The moment your enemy realizes you've taken back everything they stole from you. For me, it came when I saw Tommy again. He was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, his small face older somehow. "Daddy's not coming home," he said. I nodded. "Not for a while." He looked up at me. "You're not bad, Grandpa. I know now." Those 5 words broke something inside me. The wall I'd built between the man I was and the man I pretended to be. For the first time in decades, I let myself cry. Not for revenge, not for regret, but for release. Weeks passed. The town forgot the noise and the gossip. The world moved on, as it always does. But inside this old farmhouse, a strange kind of peace took root. Tommy stayed with me. We painted the basement, turned it into his playroom. The same basement that once held secrets now held laughter. It was almost poetic. The place that had nearly destroyed us becoming the one that rebuilt us. One evening, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just a single line on the envelope. From Clara. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note written in trembling cursive. "Thank you for saving him," it said. "He's better off with you. I hope someday you forgive us." I folded the letter and placed it in my wife's old Bible. Some forgiveness takes time. Some never comes. But I was learning that maybe it wasn't about forgiving them. Maybe it was about forgiving myself for waiting so long to fight back. Months later, I received a call from Harris. "It's official," he said. "Your name's cleared. The record's amended. The truth stands." I closed my eyes. The world didn't need to apologize. I didn't need anyone to say sorry. The truth was enough. That night, Tommy and I sat under the porch light. Fireflies blinked across the dark fields, their glow faint but steady. "Grandpa," he said suddenly, "when I grow up, I want to tell stories too, but real ones, about people who don't give up." I smiled. "Then you'll be telling mine," I said. He laughed, the kind of laugh that makes all the ghosts in a man's heart go quiet. I looked out into the night, feeling the gentle hum of life moving forward. My revenge hadn't been fire or fury. It was truth. Pure, unstoppable truth. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful vengeance of all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now so you never miss another powerful story where justice finally finds its voice.